want to make sure.
have a lot of package before we call the hearing to order. So is everybody good and comfortable starting? You feel like you know where we're headed, how we're doing it? Okay. Good morning, and thank you for attending the Aurora City Council Charter Review public hearing, both in person and online. The members of the committee who are present are myself, Allison Coombs, the chair of the committee, Councilmember Lawson, and Councilmember Marcano, and we also have Councilmember Medina present this morning as well. So I'm going to go ahead and call the hearing to order. The public hearing is now open. So we will go through each item, and during each item, if you are on WebEx and you would like to speak, please raise your hand so that staff who are running the WebEx can acknowledge you to speak. If you are in person, the clerk will call your name to speak on the items that you signed up to speak about. So without further ado, our first item this morning is regarding gendered language in the charter. So I will read the title of each item, and then the sponsor of each item will give a brief presentation, and then we will have members come up to speak. So the title of this ordinance is, "For an ordinance submitting to a vote of the registered electors of the City of Aurora, Colorado at the regular municipal election of November 7th, 2023, proposed amendments to Articles 2-2, 3-10, 3-14, Section 4, 3-14, Section 5, 3-14, Section 7, 3-15, Section 1, 3-15, Section 3, 3-15, Section 4, 3-16, Section 6, 3-16, Section 8A, 3-16, Section 8J, 3-17, Section 2, 3-17, Section 3, 5-2, 5-9, 6-5, 7-4E, 7-4F, 8-2, 9-1, 10-1, 10-5, 10-8, 11-3, 14-9, Section 6, and 15-9, Section 6 of the City Charter concerning non-substantive updates to the City Charter to render gender-specific and binary pronouns and nouns as non-binary, non-gender-specific pronouns, and nouns inclusive of all persons, specifically changing the word chairman to chairperson, the word his to their, the expression his or her to their, the expression he or she to they, the word he to they, and the word he in Articles 8-2 and 11-3 to city manager, and amending Article 5-9 to incorporate direction that uniform codes adopted by the city for inclusion in the city code shall first be amended to use inclusive, non-binary, non-gender specific pronouns and nouns. So, sorry, that's a little long, but we do have to include in the ballot language each of the sections that are going to be amended. And since this is language that we're used to using a lot, there are several of them. As the sponsor of this item, the justification is really just that obviously there is no gender specified on any role of any person operating in the city government, so the city manager will not necessarily be a man, the city attorney will not necessarily be a man, and in both of those cases, there is language specific to men in the charter. And in general, we may have people operating in any of these roles who may be non-binary. So we just want to make it streamlined and easy that there's no gender specified for any role that any person may play in our government, and that also as citizens, that your gender is not the relevant factor to your engagement as a citizen. And so we're being inclusive of all people, and that's why we're changing this language. So first, I will go ahead and open up to public comment, and then I will also review for each item the comments that we received online. City Clerk Rodriguez, do we have any people present in person to speak on this item?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. Do we have any people present online to speak on this item?
We do not.
Okay, great. Then I will review the comments that we received through Engage Aurora. The majority of them were in support, stating they agree with being more inclusive, both of people who are non-binary, or just that they agree in general, and that they appreciate updating to be more inclusive. There were a couple of questions that folks had. Some folks felt that this was not a priority item for them, but there was a question about cost. So I wanted to ask City Clerk Rodriguez, how much does it cost to add a ballot question to our regular municipal elections?
So for the regular municipal election, if it's not a Tabor question, then it should not cost us any extra unless it makes the ballot length longer. So I believe it is, let me look, Adams County, I'm sorry, it's Douglas County, ballot questions that exceed 5 inches in length when printed on the ballot would be an additional charge of $3,000 per inch over 5 inches. So 5 inches is a pretty long length, but for a regular municipal election to add ballot questions, we are charged by the county per registered voter.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like in this case, since we don't have particularly long questions like we might have with a Tabor question, there should not be a cost to adding these still relatively short in the sense of not taking up 5 inches of ballot length set of questions to the ballot. And that will also apply to the other items. None of the other items are of a length that would add 5 inches to the ballot length. So thank you, Clerk Rodriguez. Are there any other comments or discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next item, which is a ballot question regarding even-numbered year elections. And I'll go ahead and read the title. For an ordinance submitting to a vote of the registered electors of the City of Aurora, Colorado at the regular municipal election of November 7th, 2023, a proposed amendment to Section 4 of Article 2 of the City Charter concerning municipal elections to direct that regular municipal elections shall be held in even-numbered calendar years, and a proposed amendment to Section 5 of Article 3 pertaining to terms to redefine a term of office as being 3 years in length while the city transitions to regular elections occurring in even-numbered years. And I will pass this over to Councilmember Marcano to give a brief introduction.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Coombs. So as Councilmember Coombs mentioned, the purpose of this question would be to move our elections to even years. So currently, as you all know, with our odd year elections, our participation is around 30%. I think the highest I've seen over the last decade was around 35% for a mayoral election, whereas our elections on even years are much higher participation, more than double that. So this is an effort that actually has a lot of bipartisan support nationwide to basically shift elections to coincide with general elections. So this would be our state legislative elections, congressional elections, and presidential elections. What this will do is, obviously we have a higher rate of voter participation, so it will increase the participation for our municipal elections as well. And we would not be alone in doing this if it were to prevail at the ballot. We have the city of Parker, Castle Rock, and Boulder here in Colorado who have their elections on even years. And I am happy to report that with Parker and with Castle Rock, who've had this in place for some time, their turnout and participation for municipal races is just as high as it is for all of the other races on their ballot. So there's not a drop-off which is a concern that I think, that I had and I know a lot of my colleagues did have. But upon further investigation, that is not taking place in these other jurisdictions. So it's my hope that with this, we'll have a higher rate of turnout in Aurora, which will mean better representation, and hopefully more attention being paid to the really important decisions that happen at City Hall.
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. City Clerk Rodriguez, do we have any members or any community members present to speak on this item?
Yes, Patricia Dunn.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dunn. If you'll come up to the podium. And the format, I did not mention before, the format of this is not the same as our typical format, so there is... Sure, if you'd like to sit, that's okay too, I think, as long as the camera can see you. But we will allow questions to council members, and then council members may answer the questions asked by community members. Now, you can just give comment without questions as well, but I wanted to let you know that there is some exchange permitted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Absolutely. I am just thrilled with all of these charter review questions. This one very much so. To only have 30% participation for the city of Aurora, as big as we are, is quite a disappointment. And I think this will absolutely help us get higher participation as far as voting is concerned.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any questions you want to address to the committee?
No.
Okay.
But I did want to say that I'm from Ward 3 here in Aurora, and I'm wonderfully represented by Ruben Medina. I'm very, very pleased with his representation and so happy to have him as our representative.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Dunn. We appreciate you coming to speak. Do we have any comments from folks online? And again, if you're online and you wish to comment, please raise your hand so that you can be acknowledged and allowed to unmute on WebEx.
Councilmember, we have no participants online waiting for this item.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That being said, I will return to the feedback we received in Engage Aurora. There was a variety of feedback. There were some folks who had no opinion, some folks who felt that it was a good idea, that they think that it will increase transparency. One person said they agree only if the date coincides with the November election. So I do want to clarify that that's the intent. Yes. The intent is not to have even-yeared spring elections in addition to our November elections. It's to cut down on the total number of elections and increase turnout in that way. And some folks did say they believe that we will have greater turnout. There's a question of the cost. So I will defer to Clerk Rodriguez on the question of the cost of doing this.
Yes, so for even-numbered election years, the cost would be more expensive with Arapahoe County. Just for reference, in 2021, when we held our regular municipal election, the cost was around $70,000 for us. They only needed 7 voter centers. So in 2022, when we put a special question on the ballot, that cost us around $300,000, and they needed 32 voter centers, and that is because it was a midterm election. And so they have a larger voter turnout, and the state requires them to have more voter service centers.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is the why? So what's the reason for bringing this forward? Councilmember Marcano, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just kind of reiterate a bit of what I said. The main why is to increase voter participation. So on engageaurora.com, I actually was able to include some of the research that I utilized when I was looking into this proposal. And it's pretty clear that wherever you do this, you see tremendous increases in voter participation. And most importantly, the focus on local issues doesn't get lost. It just brings that to the forefront for folks who are, more inclined already to vote on even numbered cycles. So that's the primary reason behind this.
And I think that that also covers another question, which was what difference will it make? And then there was also the question, will it save money in the long run? It sounds like it will cost more to run the elections, but because there are more voters, right? It doesn't cost more money per voter. It's that just more people are voting. I do think well, maybe I shouldn't opine, but I would ask us to consider whether the increase of about $200,000 more in election costs is worth the increase in voter participation. And I think those are all of the actual questions that were asked. I'm going to confirm that that's true. Yes. Those are all the questions that were asked, so thank you, Councilmember Marcano, and thank you for those who provided comment in person as well as online. So we will move to, or is there any further discussion from members present? Okay. That being said, we will go ahead and move on to question 2C. For an ordinance submitting to a vote of the registered electors of the City of Aurora, Colorado, at the regular municipal election of November 7th, 2023, proposed amendments to Article 3-5A of the City Charter pertaining to partisanship of elections to specifically allow partisan elections, and to Article 3-7 of the City Charter pertaining to filling vacancies on council to mandate a partisan process in those instances where the vacancy to be filled occurs in an elective office that has been vacated by an elected official elected to office on a ballot where the vacating official's partisanship had been declared. And I will pass this off to Councilmember Marcano as the sponsor.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. So we've had a lot of discussion on this committee about this question, and I'll talk about some of the changes that I want to make to the language that we just discussed after I give the overview of the ordinance as it stands, or the question rather as it stands. So this has a twofold purpose. The first is to bring, I think, much needed transparency to our council races. I know that these seats are nonpartisan legally, but in reality that has never really borne out. So the idea is to make these races and these positions transparently partisan as opposed to having it be opaque as it currently is. And then the second purpose was to find a way to avoid the situation that we experienced in 2021, trying to fill Councilmember Johnston's vacancy, from ever happening again, by giving control of filling vacancies back to the electorate. So the proposal has two different ways to do that as it's currently written. The first is if we do have partisan council positions, we could utilize the existing vacancy committee process that any party in the state legislature would utilize to fill a vacancy. So precinct committee persons whose precincts reside within our wards would compose the vacancy committee. So if anything happened to any council member, those individuals who are assumed to be the most active representatives for their communities in each of their precincts would comprise that committee, and they would then get to elect a replacement. So the idea is that the values stay with the seat, or at least approximate values stay with the seat. For unaffiliated council members, they would utilize their their nominating petition packet. So for a ward candidate, that's 50 members, and then for an at-large candidate, that would be 100. And granted, there's turnaround. Folks move out of districts or get districted out of the district for which they might have previously signed a packet from. But that's still a pretty sizable chunk of folks to utilize for a vacancy committee. The second option in here is taking the partisan vacancy process out of it. Every member whenever there's a vacancy, they would just, the city would fall back on their nominating petition packet. So as I mentioned, 50 signatures for a ward council member, 100 for an at-large or mayoral candidate. That would be their vacancy committee, so independent of party. And again, the idea is to keep the values that those folks signed off on in the seat. Because ultimately, this comes back to my strong belief that we should never be the ones who select who serves with us. That should always be back to our residents. So that's why I like the vacancy process. And I'm open to either way here. Now, one of the changes that I would like to make to this in the future would be to actually bifurcate the partisan question from the vacancy process, because I do think they're both big questions, and combining them might add unnecessary confusion. And frankly, some of the conversations that we've had, Councilmember Lawson, being an unaffiliated member of our council, brought up some good points that she wouldn't have a partisan vacancy committee like I might as a Democrat. So I like the idea of switching that process just back to our nominating packets, because it would put us all on equal footing for that. So, all right, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Are there any individuals present to speak on this item?
Yes, Patricia Dunn.
Okay, Ms. Dunn, please go ahead.
I think this is an incredibly important issue that has needed addressing in a very, very long time. I like the solution for replacing the council members, as well as there's no risk for the Democrats or the Republicans. There's no risk that they would have. There would be no unfair advantage that they would have, because the unaffiliated voters are the ones that are more prevalent here in Aurora anyhow. So I don't see how showing a Democrat or a Republican on your ballot would hurt either party or any of the three parties. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you so much for your comments. Do we have any folks online wishing to comment? And again, we'll give a moment for folks to raise their hand in case they would like to do so.
No, we have no one waiting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That stated, I will review the feedback that we've received online. Some folks felt that local government should remain nonpartisan, and that to the extent that people are partisan, it's evident in their actions, the way they vote, and the way they campaign, but that people believe their council members should be concerned about what's best for the community and stay out of highly toxic partisan politics. Then some folks felt that that voters need to know what political parties and likely views the candidates have, but they did not have an opinion on vacancy committees. Other folks felt that partisan interests have become involved in our municipal elections, and since council issues are decided along party lines, voters should know the parties of the candidates they're voting for. For more transparency, folks felt that this would be beneficial. There was another question about the why, and whether or not this would be taken down to the Metro District level or other levels besides the City Council level. Yes.
All right. So I'd like to jump in on that one, because there is another why that I left out of my initial explanation, and that is that this also increases voter turnout and participation, because it is a quick and easy way to get some information on the ballot to our electorate. It's not as big of a boost in turnout as we see with even year elections, but it is still yet another boost. And I do want to mention that this is only addressing council races, so metro districts and other special districts. Those are all governed by the state legislature, ultimately. So if they ever wanted to go in that direction, that would be a question for them.
Okay, thank you. And then there are additional comments expressing concern about adding partisanship to our elections. And then one person who said they would like to streamline the process as long as it doesn't provide an unfair advantage. One person said this was very important. They felt that the mandate for nonpartisan elections does not put us in the same category as other elected officials, and that after the last contentious vacancy, they felt establishing rules was necessary. And then the final person was simply in favor of this proposal. So that's everything we have on that. Is there any further discussion or comment from members on this item? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next item regarding full-time council members. For an ordinance to submit to the qualified electors of the City of Aurora, Colorado, a proposed amendment to charter, or a proposal to amend Charter Sections 3-1 and 3-6 concerning full-time city council and their salaries. And I'll pass this on to Councilmember Lawson, who's the sponsor.
Thank you, Chair Coons. I'm bringing this forward I'm going to give three main reasons. There's multiple reasons, other reasons I have, but number one, the city is growing. Right now we have close to 400,000 people, and we're growing. The land mass and what we're building is steadily growing, especially out east and in our areas. The demands for what we have as constituent services is going to grow. It already has. Many council members right now, I know I sit on a total of 7 external committees, 3 internal, plus doing constituent services, plus having a job, plus, everything that I can do to serve on the city council. And I've done that for 8 years. Luckily, I've had a job where I've been able to do that. I think that as the city is growing and as demand for services, as what we're responsible for, and it's only going to increase, and also to give opportunities to people in our city who may not have the ability to do council and all the things that come along with that, and a job. So I think being part-time, yes, we serve the best to our ability, because we want to serve, and that's why we get into this position. But adding a full-time council would also probably give people a choice and more people in this community to run for office, which I think when we're looking at the future and future generations and how our city's going to grow and continue to expand the services and needs of our community and our neighborhoods and our residents, we're going to have to think about that. Getting different people on this with different ideas, and a lot of people just can't do it. Just because they don't have the job or the opportunity to do so. So I bring this forward because of that, looking at the future of Aurora, looking at currently what the demands are right now, and looking at the growth and the potential growth that we're going to be having in the city. In the backup, there was a discussion about the salaries, which is not actually in the packet, which I hope that it will be in the next packet. Right now, currently, the mayor makes $80,000. I wasn't trying to get to the point, in the backup or in the committee discussion, there was different variations of, this is where I wanted to get the public comment, of where we could go in terms of salary. Looking at what the current salary is in Aurora, what does that look like? Based on cost of living, what people make in Aurora. Looking at a city manager form of government, we looked at other cities that have that particular structure, and then also what they're paying their council members. We also looked at a comparison of what other cities are doing in terms of other ways. In terms of looking at how I think Arapahoe County, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to think this through, Arapahoe County, when they turned their commissioners over, what was that process and how much did they pay their council members? I think that it has to be reasonable. I think that's why I brought this forward, to actually get the opinions of the community about how they feel about a full-time council, but also to get some insight, and since we have a commission as well, of what that pay would look like and what is equitable, what meets our city you know, how we live and where we live, to make sure that people have that ability to be able to live if they want to do this work. It does not have in here, in this proposal, it does not have a moonlighting provision. So that means if someone wants to keep their other job, they can do so. They have that choice to do so. So there is nothing in here that says, if we become a full-time counsel, that you have to leave your other job. You can continue to work on, you could continue to work whatever job you want to do and serve on this council. So I just want to make sure that that was clear, because I know that there were some questions about, oh, people who work in businesses, you're kind of not letting people have that opportunity. You're also letting people, I might have to quit my job, and it might be a job that I like, or there may be something I want to work at. You do not have to do that. It is not a moonlighting provision in here, so it will not be a mandate. So with that, those are maybe the three main reasons I'm bringing this forward, and I would, I would really like to get the public opinion on this, because I have been working on this for a couple years. I'm doing a lot of research on it, and I've gotten various opinions, and so would like to get opinion on that, and that's why I brought it forth, and looking forward to some of the questions and comments from the community.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Clerk Rodriguez, do we have folks present to speak on this item?
Patricia Dunn.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dunn. Please proceed.
I feel so strongly about this. I showed up in person this morning. I feel that the council members are taking what they're given because they're working for a living. Council members here in Aurora have been underpaid, overworked for decades. They are expected to attend meetings every Monday night. Used to be every other Monday night. They have meetings outside of the Aurora City Council. They have an awful lot of responsibilities to represent us other places. You're working full-time anyhow. So if you could get some relief, it would be fantastic, where you wouldn't have to work 2 and 3 jobs. But when I read this and it said, we're going to change them to full-time, you've been full-time. You've been more than full-time. You work so terribly hard for $20,000 a year, and that's probably adds your car allowance, and that doesn't have anything to do with, mucho. So I am so pleased that this is being brought up. I would ask people to get involved and learn what your council members do. Every Friday night, I get on the internet and I look up the agenda. On the agenda, it tells you obviously what's going on, but it also shows you the backup for every item. And sometimes the backup that the council members have to read are hundreds and hundreds and even sometimes thousands of pages. And this is for a Monday night meeting. And I don't think you get the backup until Thursday or Friday, whatever it is. It's too much. You're overworked, you're underpaid, and I think this would get people out to vote, because I think a lot of people understand this and they want to support the council. If they want the council to support them, they need to support the people that work on council. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. Do we have anyone online to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay. That being stated, I will review the responses that we have online. There were a number of responses.
I didn't understand that.
Sorry, I don't know why my phone thinks I'm talking to it. There are a number of responses that indicate that they would like to keep council part-time due to the cost and wanting to direct the cost to other places, including paying staff and paying for staff appreciation, as well as concern that the money could be spent toward public safety. And then, sorry, I just have to review back over these. The question is, there's also the question of, will council members be able to relate to the community if they're not working in other jobs? counselors should have the position because they want to serve the community. It should not be full-time because that possibly changes why people choose to run. And then there are a number of comments in favor as well. One person would like to see the salaries and would want it to be no greater than 1.5 times the area median income. Other folks feel that it would increase commitment to the work and allow us to better support Aurora residents. And then that one person just wanted to hear more. As a growing city, we have more registered voters than the entire state of Wyoming, so we should probably be full-time. Also to allow people of lesser means to serve and focus all their time on their council responsibilities. And there were some questions about the moonlighting provision, which you already did address, that would people have to quit their other jobs or give up their businesses? And so you did already mention that no, according to this question, that would not be required. But would you like to address the other questions?
Yes, so addressing some of the other questions that were mentioned, that were summarized, let's start with, and I'm not saying anything derogatory to our city staff. I appreciate our city staff. But if you look at some of the salaries of our city staff, they definitely, putting more, I mean, we do pay our city staff, and I do think we definitely appreciate our city staff. And I think that that's really important. But also, too, when you're working another job and then you have this job, I do everything I can do to meet all the responsibilities and answer constituents. Sometimes I have obligations with my other job where I just can't do it. I mean, I can't. I have to work a balance. And then some people will tell me, well, why did you get on council? Well, that shouldn't stop me from wanting to get on council. If I want to serve, I should be able to serve. But sometimes there's barriers that I have to, with my job or something over here that I might not be able to attend. I think that it would give people the opportunity to choose if they decide to go put all the effort they can into the position. You put in what you do. Right now, council members, I don't know, I can only say what I'm doing. But you put in what you put in based on what your ward, and I'm at large, so we gotta look at things from all over the city, not just in a ward, but all over. And that means that sometimes it's just like some constituents like where you're not there. Well, sometimes I have to choose. It's either my job where it kind of brings in my livelihood, or I have to choose this. And sometimes I just can't be there when I want to be. And so that's where I struggle. Am I really doing the public service that I have been, that the citizens or the residents want me to do? Am I doing it at the ability or at the level that I'm supposed to do it? And that kind of is what bothers me a little bit, because I have this other job. But also to address the question about the median income, I would agree to that. I think it has to be sustainable. I'm not trying to say we're Denver, where there's 6 figures, but they're a city and county form of government. But I do think giving people the ability where it gives them a livelihood to choose if they want to just do full-time council or if they have to do both, that's based on people's situations. So that kind of gives people that choice. When we're talking about the city salaries, I understand putting money towards city, but we do pay our city employees. But also, too, how come that we also need to invest a little bit into our council members as well? I mean, we're doing a lot. Like Ms. Dunn says, we do a lot. We read a lot of pages. We have a lot of preparation to do, and I know that with that, I don't think people know, there's questions that come behind that we have to prep for or do research for so we can be prepared for meetings. So I think that that's another reason as well. And I do think the growth of the city, the demands right now, what we're dealing with in terms of public safety, in terms of how we're growing, in terms of what's the services that are needed, are only going to increase. So, and then people are going to want us to do, you have to do more. That's what we hear. You have to, why are you not addressing this issue? Why aren't you dealing with this? Why aren't you, why are we doing this? I just think that at this time, we have to think about the future of Aurora, not just now with this council or the next council, but the future of Aurora. And I think that that's what's going to be important. I'm not trying to, it's not for what we can gain. For me, it's for about looking at the future, and which I plan to be living in this city until the end of time, but it's looking at the future of Aurora and how we're growing and how we're going to have our constituents and how our representatives are going to be representing the city and the demands of the city. And I think that was it for me. I think I had basically kind of summarized everything. So that was asked or supported by or addressed in the summaries that we
Yep.
talked about, I think.
I think so.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. I appreciate you bringing this forward. I do know that a lot more people on council now work than has historically been the case. And so I believe that despite having jobs and families, folks have chosen to serve. But it is taxing. And so I would just invite us to consider that people have made that choice, but also consider who is left out, who can't really make that choice reasonably. So thank you again for bringing this forward. And so our next item is charter changes suggested by the public hearing. So this is an opportunity for folks to offer suggestions of additional changes that have not been included on this agenda. So is there anyone present who would like to offer comment and offer any additional changes?
No.
Nobody present. Anybody online?
No, there is not.
Okay, we did receive some comments within the feedback on Engage Aurora. There was a statement that non-rehabilitated felons should still not be able to run for public office. City council should not be able to circumvent the city charter on policy. I did want to clarify a couple of items there. I assume that by non-rehabilitated people mean folks who have not served their time, and that's already the case. It's people who have completed whatever sentence they may have been required to complete that would be permitted, not by the charter, but by ordinance, and that was as a result of a court order that we as a city not be in violation of the state constitution. So even though we are a home rule city, we are not permitted to violate the state constitution in relation to our elections. And so that is where that change came from. So although the charter continues to state, because the question did not pass in 2022, to remove that language from the charter. So the charter continues to state that a person may not run for office if they have ever been convicted of a felony. We still may not bar any person from running for public office unless they have committed one of the felonies indicated in the state constitution that bars people from running. Otherwise, per the state constitution and a court order to our council, or to the city, we must permit any person to petition onto the ballot who has not been convicted of one of those felonies indicated in the state constitution. So I just wanted to make sure that is clear, that that's where we're at as a city on that item. Another respondent indicated that the ability of the mayor to create a tie should be eliminated from the charter. I think that is certainly a conversation that we can bring back to the committee. The city charter should be reviewed and updated following every decennial census. A citizen advisory committee should be established to help with this process and to make recommendations. We could do that by charter or ordinance, and that's something that we also can discuss as a council. I did bring a standing committee. Well, I brought a question about what kind of a citizen committee we may want to have, a standing committee, a committee that gets convened after a certain set number of years or an ad hoc committee, and it was decided previously that we would do it as an ad hoc committee for this particular charter review, we can revisit that question about whether or not after every census would be something we want to put into ordinance or charter. And then don't change the charter was also stated. And then there was a really nice comment about what a wonderful city we have with arts, entrepreneurs, food diversity, and social economic diversity. And specifically calling out in support the Fox Theater, community centers, and pools. So thank you to whomever wrote that lovely comment. I did want to indicate another item that we have heard about that I would like to request city staff just give a presentation on how this would impact the city. So we have heard that there may be a petition circulated to change the city from a council manager system to a strong mayor system. So for the next public hearing on the 11th, I would like us to hear a presentation on changing the city from a council manager form of government to a strong mayor form of government. I think that's a relevant and important piece of information. I will also ask the other members of our body, the mayor and council, if any of them are interested in attending and providing any background and feedback on that item. So I think that's something we should discuss if there's a potential that it's going to be on the ballot. So we will add an item on that to our next public hearing. Are there any other items that folks would like to discuss for the next public hearing or to bring to the committee before we close?
No, but Councilmember Coombs, I think if you could explain to people who are listening and for this record, what is the process after this? We have these hearings, but I think it's important to explain what happens after this and the process after that, if you could do that.
Oh, yes, thank you for the reminder. So we will have one more public hearing on April 11th at 7 p.m. And then there has been a committee appointed by council. So each council member has appointed one individual that's a citizen committee to also review these recommendations that are coming out of the public hearing, as well as provide any additional recommendations that they believe we should consider as a council. So we will take all of the information then from these public hearings and from that committee back to this committee, which is currently comprised of Councilmember Lawson, Councilmember Marcano, and myself. We will discuss those and then send all of our discussion and recommendations forward to a study session. Council will review those items in a study session, which I believe we were aiming for June, at the beginning of June for the study session. Once they go to study session, these are ordinances. So we will then have two council meetings, a first reading and a second reading of all the items that we may choose to refer to the ballot to be voted on as charter changes. And then any items that are approved by a majority of council will then go to the ballot and then be voted on at our election in November. Clerk Rodriguez, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not, unless you have any specific questions. I think you covered everything.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything I was missing in how that process works. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Our next public hearing will be held on April 11th at 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. And so we will be taking comment from people in person and virtually online. There is also an Engage Aurora page for the charter review. So that's engageaurora.org. you can go there. There's a section on the charter review that includes all of these items that we've discussed, and that we will be asking staff to also update with the salary information regarding the council, full-time council question, and which will also be updated with the changes that Councilmember Marcano indicated in separating the partisan elections and vacancy committees. And again, I'm going to ask that whatever presentation comes to this public hearing regarding the potential of a strong mayor versus city manager, also that information is available on that site so that folks can provide feedback on those items as well. And I will follow up with staff on what we need to do to make those updates. So those are the opportunities that you have to comment, as well as, of course, always, you may come to a city council meeting and give public comment on non-agenda items, and you may contact your council members via phone or email with additional comments as well. So thank you all again for attending in person and online. We look forward to the continuation of the process, and with that, the public hearing is now closed.